So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the fourth session of the Fair for All webinars on sharing practical AI experiences and next steps in building a community of practice. It's part two that Aresa is hosting in partnership with iSense. My name is Victoria, and I'm the Program Assistant Sector Engagement at the Atlantic Region Association of Immigrant Serving Agencies, also known as ARESA. For those of you who may not be familiar with ARESA, we are a nonprofit umbrella organization that supports organizations in the important work of helping to settle and integrate newcomers into our Atlantic Canada communities. And ARESA also serves as a collective voice and forum for our members. This meeting will be in English, and simultaneous interpretation is available in French. If you need interpretation, please click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen and choose your preferred language. And I'd like to welcome our speakers today, Denise and Nathan. We're very happy to have you both with us to deliver this presentation. You each bring very impressive resumes. So Denise Lowe is an English for academic purposes and teaching English as a second language teaching faculty at Douglas College, bringing over 15 years of global experience to her current role from the University of Alberta, Yonsei University, and the University of Southern California. Her experience extends to curriculum development projects, including Memorial Project with Canadian Language Benchmarks and the Canadian Broadcasting Company. Additionally, she has shared her expertise in teacher training through the Northwest College Teal program in Alberta, Canada. Denise's passion for educational technology has earned her the University of Alberta Remote Teaching Award. And Nathan Hall is the Educational Technology and Pedagogy Coordinator for Douglas College, as well as teaching faculty in the English Language Learning and Acquisition Department and teaching English as a second language program. He also helped develop and currently leads the Douglas Educational Support Community, which provides support to all educators at Douglas College in various areas, such as educational technology, universal design for learning, and open education. Nathan started teaching English in 1997 and has worked in Lithuania, Ukraine, England, Scotland, and Canada in the areas of business English, English in the workplaces, LINC, and English for academic purposes. Nathan received the Douglas College President's Distinguished Service Award in 2023 for his work in supporting faculty members as they moved their courses online during the pandemic. So with that, Denise and Nathan, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much. It's always weird to hear those introductions. You're like, did I do all of those things? But I do want to just say that Denise is fabulous to work with and is far more than just what you just read on the screen. So thank you, Denise, I love working with you. And so I'm looking forward to this time together today. Another thing I wanted to say is thank you to everybody who comes to these sessions. I'm just thinking it's December 18th. And all of these people are showing up to learn more. And to me, I highly value professional development. It's one of the things I try and instill in my new teachers and their teacher training program. And I see all of these names. I don't obviously see your faces, but see all these names and think, these people are taking time this close to the holidays to be able to actually come. And so I value your time and I value the fact that you want to learn more. And we will do our best to try and help you out as much as possible. I'm always nervous in things like this because I'm not entirely sure of the people I'm working with, and I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm helping you. So please feel free to just put into the chat or to speak out or raise a hand, that kind of thing, to let us know if there's something specific that you're wanting to try and make sure that you have clarity on. Maybe I share something you're not sure, or it sparks something that you want to discuss. We're open to doing that. We're both very flexible in regards to what happens today. The first session that Denise gave, which was done very well, was much more structured in introducing the idea, and today is a lot more unstructured in some ways because it'll be more responsive to what we hear from you. And so please feel free to share, to ask questions and comments. This is for you. So I want to make sure that we're doing the best for you. So I do have some slides. I'm not, this is not going to be a slide heavy type of presentation, but I wanted to give us something to kind of ground us a little bit and then move from there. So I'm just going to just share those first. So obviously this is the name of the session that was given, to share practical AI experiences and next steps in building a community of practice. So I see it as two parts. So there's the share part, and that's what we're hoping for. We're hoping to hear more from you, and then talking about building a community of practice. So the idea of how can you then take what you have learned in Denise's session and then what we discussed today, and then start applying that, maybe working together with other people to try and see if there's a way of kind of developing this more and building those skills a bit more. Because that's one of the things I often see is that people will attend a session for something, get very excited about it, but then end up hitting a roadblock because they don't have other people to bounce those ideas off of. So I'm hoping that in some ways you can start to connect with other people to start doing that, where you can start building that community of practice. Um, I also wanted to start off with a land acknowledgement. I respectfully acknowledge that the place I work on is located on the unceded traditional and ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Katzie, the Kwantlen, the Coquitlam, Musqueam, and Kakite First Nations. So our campus, which is in New Westminster, BC, is smack dab in the middle of the Kakite First Nations. And I live in an area for the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish people. And so I just think of all of these groups of people from which I can learn from and I can be a part of as being a guest here. And I wasn't welcomed here. I just arrived here, but I have been welcomed by these people as we've been here. And I appreciate the things that they bring in helping us to decolonize what we're doing and try and bring in those indigenous ways of knowing and learning. So I appreciate all that they have offered to me and to us as an institution. So today, I had set up some tasks um, that we gave you kind of piece by piece throughout the time. You got one task a week basically to kind of take a look at, and I'll show that site in a moment. So we'll review some of those tasks and maybe find out where people are at and what, if did they have a chance to play with that? Did they chance to play with what Denise had shared? So we'll find out a little bit more there. So we'll take a look at some of those tasks. Then we're going to look at AI prompting. This has been a big part for me as part of my journey in learning more and more about generative AI. And that is the more I learn about how to give information to the AI and frame things, the better responses I get. When I initially, as most people, when they started off with generative AI, they were playing around with, of course, first it was ChatGPT and just kind of throwing things into ChatGPT like, give me a list of the best movies of 2023 or something, and people it would give you this list, and people would laugh because it was ridiculous most of the time. But as we start to frame out specific things, and we'll talk more about that in a second as we get there, but as you start to frame things, they get much more specific. Instead of it pulling from a vast, huge library, we've narrowed that library down into a very specific area, and it becomes much more precise and it becomes much more nuanced. And so we're going to talk more about how to best leverage prompting to get what you want out of AI. And then, of course, we'll take questions, and we can take questions throughout the way. So I'm open to taking questions as we go. I won't necessarily stop and answer those questions immediately in that. I might find a spot where I pause, and then we'll take some of those questions. But if there is something that comes up that maybe you're confused by something, I need to backtrack just a little bit, please feel free to throw that into the chat, and we'll take care of it from there. So I'm just going to quickly switch over to the site just to talk about reviewing the tasks and then see where people are at in regards to that. And so Just want to get over to here. So I actually gave a site for you to be able to kind of play around with, and that closed for me some reason. There it is. Um, and so this was the site that we gave you. And in this site, I had a number of tasks that were on the right-hand side. I specifically chose these tasks because they gave a variety of different things. I didn't want to overwhelm, but I wanted to also show some specific things that were happening. So for example, the very first one was to create a virtual teaching assistant. And this one here, the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because it does lead us in more into this prompting thing as we go through. And so in this particular case, this one comes from Ethan and Lilac Malik. Um, Ethan Mollick posts a lot of really good stuff on his website each week. I subscribe to his newsletter and I follow through on that. And this came up shortly before we actually gave the November 20th session. And I thought it was interesting because to me, it really framed out how detailed you can get in prompting. So this gray box that you see here, this whole thing, which is quite long, as you can see here, is the entire prompt. He got incredibly detailed with it. And really, all you have to do in that particular case is to take this and you copy it. So I'm just going to do that. And we'll do a show and tell type of thing here. So I'm going to copy that text and I'm going to go into something fairly, I can choose whatever tool I want. So I'm just going to go into, I'm not even logged in to ChatGPT. This is the free version that doesn't require a registration. It's limited by number of responsive. I'm just going to use that for now just to show you what is available to you and your students. So I put that in and immediately it switches over to becoming an AI teaching assistant creator. And this is the key. So once it asks you things like, it prompts you a series of questions. So this one's going to ask you what kind of task I want to do. So I say I want to create a rubric, I think was the example I for writing task. So just start with that. And then it asks me the level. And so I'm just going to give it the CEFR level because it tends to recognize CEFR quite well. And it's for writing an introduction or an essay. So something like that. Um, and then what it does is it says, what specific criteria would I like to cover? And so there's things like I want to talk about grammar, spelling, and I want to put thesis statement and things like that. I'll just leave it at that for now. And it'll do that. And what it does is it creates a virtual assistant, which I can copy and start a new chat. So I'm going to clear that chat, put that in. And so then what it does is it starts to, it asks me more questions. So what it's done is it's created a very specific assistant, an assistant who's used to writing rubrics for writing assignments. And so it's very, very narrow in the scope of which it wants to do. And so now I can keep this and use this anytime I want to create a writing rubric for my students because I have 3 different levels of students. Maybe I want to do that for 3 different levels. And so I might change it from B1 to B2 for my next level or whatever. But it just shows you some of the things that can be done where you can actually take a long prompt which details out, and then it will specifically narrow it down to what you want to do. So I'm going to actually just pause for a moment because what I would like to do is I'm going to actually even stop sharing is I would like to take the time to kind of see where people are at in regards to what you did. Did anybody complete any of the tasks? Did they do anything with Gen AI? It doesn't have to be these specific tasks, but did you do anything between the time when Denise shared and when, of course, today when I'm sharing? What was your experience? What did you find? Was it successful? Was it unsuccessful? Did you have more questions? What were the results that you got out? So I'm going to pause, and if you have a chance, you can either type things into the chat or you can raise your hand and we're happy to have you speak out as well too. So I'm just going to pause for a moment and see if there's anybody who wants to share anything at this point. And don't be afraid. This is a learning time. So a lot of people are going to be new to this. So if you feel like you're new and you're not quite sure what to say about it, that's okay. You're probably in with good company. There's probably a lot of people in that same boat. So anything? Did anybody have a chance to do that? Ah, used a few times a week to create listening activities. Oh, fantastic. I had somebody raise their hands, and I apologize for pronunciation. Is Nojid? Is that right?
Yes, hi, I am
Hi.
Nujud. So usually I would use the ChatGPT to help me, especially in the rubrics thing. And usually I will upload the benchmark, the CLB benchmark as a
Good.
document, and I will give the command for it to use it for CLB one level in Canada, and it's useful. I just wanted to share my experience.
Thank you. Thank you. And actually, it brings up a good point, and that is prompting doesn't necessarily mean you having to type in everything as well, too. As you did, you uploaded some of the content in which to base the rubric off of. And that's, I do that as well, too. So, for example, I might have my actual assignment instructions, which I upload as a document to it, or maybe it's part of the reading, and I'll upload the reading part so that we can then get much more narrow, much more specific. And that's one of the things that I think people miss out on is they see the limitation of the typing in all that information, but really it can be a combination. You can upload stuff as well too. So thank you for that. Um, Sarah, I see your hands up next. So did you want to share anything there? Oh, you're muted still. Did you want to unmute there, Sarah?
Yeah,
Oh,
actually, sorry, my hand is up by mistake, but while my
that's
hand is up,
fine.
I'm going to ask a question. So I did not, yeah, I did dabble with this a little bit before your seminar
Okay.
series.
Yeah.
And I'm very new to
Yeah.
AI, and I'm teaching, a 6-7 class, and I'm dying to try this. But
Yes.
I just found that whatever I used as prompts was not refined enough in terms of getting what I wanted.
Right.
And I also, as a lead teacher, I also have colleagues who are using this, and I feel it's really eroding at the pedagogy of some of the things that we've
Sure.
learned with the
Yeah.
CLBs. So I'm trying to sort of find ways that that's not going to happen. But I found that it didn't really give me what I wanted.
And that's, I think
So,
that's really good comment. Really, really good comment. Because that was exactly where I was when I started as well, too.
mhm.
I'm exactly the same place. I felt
Okay.
exactly the same way. I said the quality of the output that was coming out was not good. It was not listening
Yes.
to me. It wasn't producing what I wanted it to do. And I felt like people, my colleagues, not specifically Denise or others in my area, but in other areas across the college, who were just putting stuff in, grabbing it, and putting it into their Blackboard
Right.
course or whatever it is, their Moodle course or whatever.
Mhm.
And they weren't providing that critical thinking part to it. What is it actually
Mhm.
doing? Is it because I was finding it was hitting a lot of the times it was hitting these very low level memorization, fill in the blank
Right.
type stuff, which
Mhm.
is fine for some practice stuff, but it really didn't develop much beyond that. And I found that that's where that prompt that Ethan Mollick wrote out, if you find, he actually tells it, do not do these things. It restricts it from doing those low level things and forces it to create stuff at, say, let's just take Bloom's taxonomy kind of thing, the higher level of the Bloom's taxonomy,
Right.
or in those kind of pieces. And you'll find that it becomes much better because you've restricted it now. You've told it not this, only
Mhm.
this. So I think you're right, Sarah, and I applaud you because you've been thinking about this stuff and you've been critical of this, and that's what we want. I don't want people just blindly going through, but now I'm starting to see the value in it because I am able to get it to produce mostly what I want. Sometimes I fight with it. So,
May I ask
yeah.
how long, because it's really all about us training AI to
Yes.
produce what we want. May I ask, how did you, I mean, the process of refining these prompts,
Yeah.
and I know there's a prompt and engineering workshop also coming up.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying, I guess I'm struggling a little bit with how I can refine those prompts.
That's really good. That's really good. And so I'm going to give you a framework later. So I'm going to leave it,
Okay, all right.
park that for a moment, Sarah, as we
Yeah,
go
yeah.
back to it. But you've hit exactly the point, and that is, I have people who are like, I'm not getting the results I want. How do I get the results I want out of this? And so that's what I'm hoping to provide for you a little bit today. So thank you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks for your work as a lead. I taught Link. I really appreciate my lead instructor. So thank you.
Thank you.
Aruj, is that right? Did I pronounce it correctly? My apologies again if I mispronounced the name.
Hi there. Yes, that's absolutely correct, Nathan. Thank you very much. That's pretty informative. Just I thought to share some of my experience with
Yeah.
ChatGPT. I use it almost every day now because I felt that it saves a lot of time. However, the part Sarah mentioned and you earlier at the beginning of this seminar is yes, we need to tweak the information we are getting again and again, asking it what actually we are looking for. The good thing I found is even you can put YouTube link and you
Yes.
ask GPT to design for example CLB level 4 get filling activity and provide me the answers. However, we again need to check back all the
Yeah.
information it's providing because sometimes the information is not too accurate and it's confusing. Again, yes, you can repose the same thing and asking ChatGPT to simplify it according to the level of our students. So it's pretty helpful. It's saving a lot of time. But as a teacher, it's our responsibility to go over and make sure that what we are delivering to our students.
You're hitting on the head. I think again coming back to what I use it for, and that is if I have some very low level kind of repetitive tasks that I could complete. I can do this, but it's going to add 30 minutes to my day. And if I can get it to get most of the way there in 30 seconds, and then I can take that results and refine it and fix it. That really helps me save a lot of time. And I think that's where I'm doing is I'm offloading. We often talk about this in AI, about offloading stuff. I don't want to offload my learning. And that's what I'm trying to instill into my students is that I want you to use it to help you to learn, but don't offload your learning. And that same thing as a teacher. I'm not offloading the things that I need to be critically thinking of and working through. But if it can get me most of the way there and do it, that'd be great. I'll give you an example. Yesterday we were doing, we're still working. We have to, every 5 years, we have to do this extensive program review for our department. And so we're sorting through these survey data, we're sorting through all this stuff. And so yesterday, a colleague and myself, we sat through and read through all the surveys and we read through all of the pieces of information and we highlighted the things that we wrote down a list of all the things that we thought would be relevant for the area which we're writing about. And then I just took those and I popped them into ChatGPT and I said, put this into a chart for me. So it organized it into a chart for me. And then once it did that, I noticed it had missed a couple of pieces and had errored on a couple of other pieces. But the majority of it, which would have taken me probably around 30 minutes to kind of create this chart and add all this detail, took a minute to do. And then it left me about 5 to 10 minutes to kind of refine things and be done with it. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I think that's probably what you're saying, Aruj, is that
yes, absolutely.
It's offloading those pieces to it. Yeah.
Yeah, you hit the bullseye. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. There's been some stuff in the chat. Sample prompts. I'm going to show you some stuff on kind of a framework of prompting, but I'm also going to show you some sample prompts again as well too. And yes, you can also train it to do some stuff as well too. So you can upload, and I'll show you another tool as well too. I don't know if anyone's heard of Notebook LM. It's from Google. I'll show you that in a moment as well too. That's helpful in kind of compiling it and say, I'm restricting it to just these documents and these websites and these YouTube videos, just these pieces. Don't look at anything else around, just this material. And then it helps you to kind of work from that. So, okay. So thank you. We'll do another pause at some point and take some more comments and questions, but that's really helpful. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about that. I will just, oh, sorry, Najud, did you have your hand up again or did? No? Okay, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Okay. So what I'm going to do really quickly here is I'm going to switch back to that website and just talk a little bit more about those those tasks that we had. So let me just share here. Okay, so this task, the reason why I brought up this task is one, it can just show how detailed you can get into a prompt. Plus, it also creates a nice little AI assistant. I don't know if this is one of the problems. I don't know what people have access to. I know in Avenue, if you're teaching a link that you do have access to H5P. So I'm kind of thought that maybe H5P would fit in this particular case. For those who don't know H5P, that's fine. You don't need to know H5P. But essentially, it's a place to create interactive elements that you can embed into a page or a learning management system like Avenue or something like that. And so one of the things that's really interesting is that there are certain H5P elements that can have what's called a text input, which means that you can actually create all your stuff as a real text document and then copy and paste the stuff over into it without having to go through and use the actual tools where you have to type everything into the boxes in H5P. And one of those, for example, is the summary tool. And so I had the task here just to showing an example of that was the prompt that was given and then what it gave me. And I copied that out and created the H5P module to show here. So it's one of the things that we teach in our English for Academic Purposes classes about hedging language. And so we just try and do that. And as you do that, then it can give you these type of module that you wanted to create. I could do this on my own, and I have done this on my own for years with H5P. But again, offloading some of the heavy work, I can then have it do some of this low-level type of stuff and then just edit it. The stuff that actually came out of this was not exactly 100% correct. I did actually change one or two of these, but all I had to do is refine those before I put it into the H5P module. And so if you're interested in how that works, I'm just going to quickly show. I'm not going to spend a lot. Trust me, I'll spend like 1 minute on this. If you're doing an H5P, and so if everybody knows the H5P kind of thing here, when I go into summary, just to give you an idea of, because I think the summary was the first one I did here. I create a summary one. In here, what you're looking for is the textual input. And this is what the text that gets created by the Gen AI that gets pasted in here. And then that's it. It's now done. You can edit the text here, but you don't have to go in through this and copy and paste each statement into each part, which is very tedious. Typing it in that way can be quite tedious. This is much faster and it works really, really well. So there's a number of them that do that, just to give you the idea here. If I go back, that link that I had in here was from H5P itself. And in here, it talks about creating single choice set questions, H5P summaries, drag the words where you have to drag the words into the correct boxes. So it looks like this, where you drag them into the right boxes. And there's also the multiple choice quiz, fill in the blank, and mark the words. All of those have a textual input, so you can do that with this. I'll give you a little tip here as well, too. You'll notice that a lot of these prompts, this is the prompt here from H5P about how to create a drag the words one. You have to then go in and change your topic and how many paragraphs and 3 things. I'm actually creating a new prompt that will first ask what kind of H5P module they want to take, then the topic, then the things, and it would fill in all of that information as you go along. And this is one of the things I'm also starting to learn with prompting is I can create a prompt for a one-off thing, but then I have to always edit that prompt each time I want to do something different similar to it. I'm getting more into the idea of creating prompts that actually AI then asks me for information that I can fill in those blanks, and then it creates the material. So it's reusable. I can just create the prompt once and I can use it for multiple different types of things. And so that's where I'm starting to get more into thinking a little bit more about reusability of these prompts and how I can do that. So that was one of the tasks I also gave you. And the next one I had was using something called Claude. So I'm just going to quickly do an overview here. I use a number of different AI tools. I use Copilot because it's part of our institutional tools that we have here at Douglas College. And so we have access to the institutional level Copilot, so I can use it. And it actually does not store the data and use it for training purposes. I can host anything I want here and I don't have to. So I actually use Copilot quite a bit when I have copyrighted material that I don't want to have scraped by the AI engine to use as part of a training, I want to keep it safe and secure in that case. So I use Copilot quite a bit. I often do use ChatGPT quite a bit because I do find the results are different from Copilot. And so some things turn out better. For example, I find actually it does better with charts, even though Copilot does use Excel. um, I use Claude as well. And for those who don't know Claude, Claude is another AI tool from Anthropic. And what the neat thing about Claude is that it can create something called web artifacts. So that's what I asked you to do in this particular case was I said, create an online interactive element using Claude. And so you can create a web artifact. And so I ended up creating this tool here, which is a link that people can do, and it's just a little game. And so I didn't program any of this. My programming, just to give you an idea, I've been working on computers since 1981. I had my first computer then. That starts to tell you how old I am. And I learned programming on my own as I was a kid. I even took a college course at 13 on programming. And then I got bored. As a 13-year-old, that happens. I got bored of it, didn't want to do it, and walked away from it. And then I didn't really do programming for years and years and years. Did a little bit more dabbling with it when I was in college, and then I stopped again. So I'm not a programmer. I can recognize certain things in code, but don't ask me to code. I don't know how to code. This has all been coded by AI. I didn't do a single thing. And the back end part of this is saying that it will host this for you as well. So you can share it out and it doesn't cost you anything. It's a free account to do this. You can get the pro account to do more stuff, but this one's kind of fun. I made a 2-person dice playing game. And so now I can actually then use it to, I can do things like I can spell out and you can see each letter has different words, just or different points, just like Scrabble. I asked it to do that. And so then it goes back and forth between player 1, player 2, and they go through 5 turns and then to see who got the most points and that kind of thing. Very, very simple and very easy to do. I can show you how I did that because it keeps track of all of this stuff. So here is my dice-based game. I prompted it by asking it at the beginning to create a web artifact. And that's the key phrase with Claude. You tell it to create a web artifact, which means it's going to create a hosted online interactive element. And then you tell it what kind of, and I said it should be a Scrabble type of game, word game, but use 8 dice with letters instead. So it did that. And it looked like this, which was okay, but I wanted to make it a 2-person game. So I said, make it so the dice rolls after every word submission because it had to roll the dice thing. And then I said, make it a 2-person game with alternates. Also put point values next to each of the dice. So that's what it did here. You can see that. And then I said, remove the roll the dice button and limit the game to 5 turns. So it did that. And that's the game I ended up with. So that was all I asked it to do. And that was what I ended up creating. And so if you are interested in this, if you're interested in creating some interactive elements, you now have the ability to use H5P to have it do that kind of stuff. And you have this, and there's actually other options, but I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds there. I just wanted to let you know that each tool does things slightly differently and slightly better. So I use that one. And then the last one I also use quite a bit is from Google called Notebook LM. Let's see if it loads up. It is. And so I actually loaded up the transcript from a video, and then it actually did a summary little thing with it. And now I can actually ask it questions and just interact with that particular text. I can load up as many texts as I want and videos and all sorts of stuff in here, and then I can ask questions. And here's the really funky thing about this. It'll create a podcast on this topic talking between 2 different people, and it sounds exactly like 2 people having a podcast. And we'll do about 10 to 12-minute podcast on it. So fun stuff, really helpful. And what I like about it is when I'm researching a particular topic, I can actually deep dive into just those pages and not go into anything else. So I'm going to pause now because I've talked a little bit about that and I saw a few questions pop up. I'll stop sharing and we'll see what we have for some questions and things like that. Oh yeah, so just mentioning about the Copilot. So if you do have Copilot or Microsoft 365, Office 365 as part of your institution, you probably have access to what's called the enterprise version of Copilot. Enterprise version of Copilot does not host and keep any of the data that you upload. None of the text you upload, the typing, the documents you upload, anything, nothing gets added to the training module. And so that's very, very helpful. And so if you are working with students, like our students have access to it that way, then I know that their privacy is protected, copyrights and protected as well too. So, but I just wanted to ask any questions here. If anybody did they try any of those other things, or are there things that you would like to kind of do, but you're not sure how to go about it? That's another thing. I can also help with that a little bit. I'm going to pause and take questions and comments at this point as well. If you don't have any, that's fine. We can move on to the next part. Doesn't look like it at this point. Oh, Sarah, when you have a question?
Sorry, I'm just going to mute myself. I'm curious about how you're using Notebook
Notebook LM.
Notebook LM to create a podcast. I'm just curious how you're using that in class. And I mean, that is so intoxicating to me in terms
It's a
of
high level. So first off, we're dealing with students. Remember, our students that come into our courses have an IELTS 4.5. So they're CLB, whatever it is, 6, I think, already at that point. And then, so we have high, right? So ours are 6 to 8 kind of level CLB.
Right.
And so we're always trying to find good listening material on specific topics, and that's really hard to find sometimes, right?
Yes.
And so I find that this was really kind of cool because I could load up a bunch of stuff, have it create because we do task-based teaching, a lot of task-based teaching here. So as it is with CLBs. And so we have a topic which we're kind of exploring, and then they're doing a project on it, that kind of stuff. And so I created a podcast for them to listen to, and that was this podcast based off of it. Was everything correct in it? It was 99% correct. Okay. It was pretty good though. And the audio did not sound like it was AI generated at all. It sounded authentically like two people having a conversation. Lots of
I was going to ask.
Kind of stuff. It was amazing. It's actually kind of spooky how good it is. But going back to what Denise had brought up last time too, for the more lower level kind of things, creating stuff, that's where things like a real simple tool like Roshi can do that. I know it requires a paid account and that kind of thing, but it's not as authentic, obviously. It's obviously much lower level in a lot of cases, but it is a good tool for creating some nice basic kind of listening material off of it. And Roshi does a pretty good job with that. Yeah. I'm experimenting a little bit more with some other tools, which I will not get into today because it gets you way deep in the weeds. But I've been doing a lot of work with audio generation and having a text description to audio generation. And it's not long. Like if we had this same seminar next year at this time, I bet you it would be a totally different story. Within a year, I think we're going to be in a totally different situation. So there you go.
So yeah, sorry. Can I ask one more question that's related to that?
Yes.
So, I mean, the reason that is very attractive, especially for CLB 6, 7, 8, which is what my students are, it is so time consuming and so labor intensive to find authentic materials to follow up with, right? Follow up on. So
100%.
So I'm assuming then, I mean, I haven't tried Notebook LM. I'm assuming Notebook LM and Web Artifact could help with that.
So the Web Artifact's different. Web Artifact, think of it more like an H5P module.
Okay.
Kind of thing. So it's more like those low level kind of practice exercises, that kind of stuff. Check-ins, all those kind of pieces. I do a lot of check-ins with my students. Notebook LM is, I'm trying to think of how I could possibly use those students because they have to log in with a Google account, and I don't want to make them log into a Google account, but a lot of them already have a Google account. But it's a great way of adding, these are the components I have. Now I want to have a discussion about it, and then they can create this listening activity based off of that. So I'm doing it more from the teacher end. I'm downloading an MP3 file, and then I'm uploading it and having them listen to it. And then I created some material based off of that. So just play around with it. If you have a Google account, just go to Notebook I think Denise put in the link into the chat. And then you can work from there. So Alex has a good question. Sorry, Sarah. I'll move on to the next question if that's all right with you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Alex asked about any AI tools used on Teams that could translate. You think of Microsoft Teams. Yeah, I mean, Copilot does a pretty good job of translation. I'm going to say right now. I I lived 4 years in Lithuania, and my Lithuanian's starting to fade on me. I'm trying to remember a lot of it, and so I actually asked Copilot to become my Lithuanian language tutor, and it actually does a very good job. I'm really kind of surprised. And so I know that translation, it works pretty well. I know when I'm talked with my students and stuff like that, like I ask them which tools seem to work better for that kind of stuff. ChatGPT does a pretty good job. Copilot does a pretty good job. Those kind of things do a pretty good job, but it's not live in what you're trying to say. So don't know. I have an answer for that. Denise, do you have something off the top of your head about live translation? No. Okay. Wish I did. Sorry. We'll look into that. Okay. I'm going to move into prompting just because thinking of time here and making sure that we make the best of our time here. So I'm going to show just kind of a framework, which this was, what's really funny is I created this, these kind of for myself. And then I attended a session just recently with another person who's really good with AI. His name is Lucas Wright. He's from the University of British Columbia. And it's funny, we have a very similar framework, but his is much cleaner and easier to remember because he spelled it out with acronym ACTOR. But I feel pretty good about myself because he's really good with this stuff and mine was pretty close to his. So I feel like, oh, I must be doing something right. So this is where I'm at. So this is creating an effective prompt. And so first off, what do we mean by prompt? I'm going to define because I keep using the word prompt. Prompt is the information you give AI to ask it to do something. So, oh, we have a hand up. Sorry. Go ahead from our RASA team.
Sorry, Nathan. Just a message from our interpreters. Is it possible for you to slow down speaking just a bit,
Sorry.
please? No
Yes.
problem, just to note.
I'm sorry. I get excited and I start to
For
get
sure.
talking fast. So
It's a good
I
reminder for participants as
absolutely
well.
can slow down. So thank you for the reminder. I take that to heart. I remember.
Thank you.
So prompts. Prompts are one of those things that people make a lot of, you read about a lot in the news, they make a big deal out of it. What's funny is that there is a lot of hype around prompting, but most of it's real. Most of it's true. AIs have a lot of data to pull from, like incredible amount of data to pull from. But you have to narrow it down to the area which you wanted to work with. Otherwise, it's like talking with someone who is just randomly going to pull stuff from the top of their head, and it's not very helpful. So really, you want to scale down that conversation down to something very specific. And so prompts are a way of asking it to do stuff. And I like to treat it like as if it's someone who takes things far too literally. So I'm just going to go into the first part here to give you an idea of what I mean by that. So the first thing you want to do is define your goals and roles. So a goal would be things like, I want to create an interactive element where students can match a definition to a word or something like that. That's kind of a terrible example, but gives you an idea. I've told it just very basically what my end goal is. I want to have this out of this. And the role is I might tell it, you are a programmer and I want you to do this kind of stuff. Both the role and the goal are actually fairly short. It's more about telling the AI to take on a persona. So an example of where this came about was I said a goal for my students was to have them talk with AI as if they were being hired for a job. And so the AI was the employer interviewing them for a job. And this was all part of a chance to be able to play around a little bit with this. So the goal is have a chance for my students to be, my TESOL students in this case it was, to practice interviewing for an English language teaching job. And then the role was you are the employer and working at this. And I gave very detailed about what the job was and all that kind of stuff, but that's your role. So now I've set the goals and roles. Now it does a much better job. I find that AI, when you give it a role and you give it a very clear, defined role in which to be who you are, it's much better in the output it gives you. So that's one thing. Then be specific and clear. Like I said, it's very literal. One of the things I had just recently was I had it create a little memory game for me where it was a blank card. So it's a blue on one side, and on the other side is white with black text, and there's a black border that goes around it. So in my head, I can see it. And I tell it, I just want you to create a memory game. It's going to be a matching of this and this. And what it did is it put all the cards face up. So then, of course, they're easy to match because all the text is up. And I'm like, no, no, no. I want you to put the blue side up. And when I click on it, you flip over to the text. Oh, okay. So it wants to do that. And it flipped over. And when it did that, all the text was reversed because it literally thought reversed. I'm like, no, the text has to be readable. So you're having to be very specific and clear. And this is going to come back later when I talk about the iteration of things as we go through stuff. But it's amazing how detailed you have to be because otherwise it'll start wandering off and making assumptions, which you don't want it to do. So be very specific and clear. Give it context. So in some situations, this is important, very important. In other areas, it's less important. But in this particular case, you're limiting to things like language level. These are language students at this level, and they're taking this type of class. So it gives them context about who the audience is that they're working with. And so then that way, you know, again, it knows what to limit to. And I even tell it, I think Denise uses this as well too, where we limit it to kind of the top 1,000 words in English, top 500 words in English, that kind of thing. So it defines the language to most common language. So we're looking for high frequency words. So that way it doesn't give you very complex terms and things like that. So I'll restrict it quite a bit and I'll give it context that way. Then you'll provide examples. Let's come back to my memory game. I actually told it this is a match, this and this. Here's another example of it. And I give it this and this. And so then that way it knows that's what we're looking for, something like that. Sometimes it will be the kind of language you're using. So I'll say, avoid these kind of languages like this and do it more like this. So I provide examples. So that is another very important piece I think that gets missed a lot is examples for it. Again, it'll make assumptions if you don't. And then setting constraints. So you might tell it that you want to only have 3 paragraphs or 500 words. It doesn't do very well with word count for some unknown reason. I've never figured this out. You think AI would be smart to do word count, but it seems for unusual reasons to avoid it. But it's generally close. It's not exact though. Although I have forced it at times to be exact. And then I end up with some really weird results because it will stick exactly to 500 words, for example. So I give it a range, 500-600 words. And that's usually pretty good, a nice range. But I also set other constraints too. Don't do this. So adding things like do not include these things. And then do these things. So for example, in Ethan Mollick's long prompt he restricted by saying don't use learning styles because he didn't want that being brought into this. And he wanted to include higher level Bloom's taxonomy. So things like that will be the kind of the constraints that you're setting. But it can also be other physical constraints too. So this memory game, for example, I wanted it to fit on a mobile phone as well. And so I told it to make sure that it would fit into a narrow vertical space. And so it would do that as well. And then consider the audience. Again, this comes back again to what I had done before. But when you're writing the prompt, it's always good to tell AI these are the people that are going to be using this. And so this is what I would like to have out of this. And then it's just a matter of refining, iterate. So you will never get it 100%. And another thing I'm going to say is run it through multiple different types of chats, as well as even the same one on a different day. You'll get different results. That's one of the things that happens. And I can give an example of that just recently. So I'm going to actually pull up something here. So I did, let's see if this will pull up here for me. Oh, there it is. You can see here, I tried to ask it to do something and it gave me code back. It didn't work properly. And so I ended up having to do something different. But let me just try this one here. This one should work. So here is kind of this little memory game I had it create for me. So what it does is it gives you different verb tenses, and you need to find the name of the verb tense, the type of the verb tense, and do this. And when you get a match, it gives you a point and it says good match. This one, when I created my prompt came from this. Here's my prompt here. So you can see I have a lot of the same stuff I just mentioned. I have my goal and I have my role. And I gave the details about how the game is played. Like I said, I got very detailed. And then I got into even more details about the color and the size and the frame and all that kind of stuff. And then I said user information. So it asks it for specifically kind of the topic and things like that it would want to do. But you can see in here, I've set off a lot of details to have that happen. The first time I ran it, it worked 100%. That's rare. It worked perfectly. And then I took that same thing and I ran it through Copilot because it was this ChatGPT. I did it through Copilot and it didn't work. And I had to make some refinements. And then I took that same prompt the next day, went back to ChatGPT and did it again, and it didn't work. So sometimes these things work perfectly the first time and not. And that comes back to that iteration. I'm learning more and more about where some of the things, it's almost better. This is a scientific method, right? Almost better when things don't work properly the first time, because you can then refine and narrow the scope down far more. But that's the key to AI is don't just assume that everything's going to work always the same every time. Make sure you run it through multiple times and see how it works. And if you're going to be using it with students, be prepared that some stuff might not work properly. So, um, so here's where we come to this point. Has anybody had a chance to play around a little bit, maybe with some prompting at this point here? And then what I would like to do, we'll take some of that, but as people are maybe putting stuff into the chat about some of the idea of prompting and was that helpful, some comments or whatever, what I would like to do, if you're good with this with me, is we can do a little bit of a play with this. I'll actually pull up each of those areas and we'll work through and try and create a prompt as we go. Oh, I did skip one thing, sorry. Let me show this back again. I knew I'd forget that if I didn't do it. Here's an example. The objective, the goal, was to generate a short article for EAP students. And I put a context in here. Notice I didn't have a role in this one because it wasn't really a role for them to play at this point. So I didn't put it in, but I could have had it a role. I probably would have put it in as you were a writer for English language teaching textbook or whatever, that kind of stuff. So again, it would have that context in its head. I limited it to because I'm teaching this one class. In that particular case, we have this thing about fast fashion and environmental concerns. And so it goes through that. And then it goes through the constraints. Here are the links, the level, focus, tone, style, avoid this. And I gave an example. So here are the different pieces that went into to try and make it work. And it actually works pretty well. This prompt, because it's not something that's really technical, like a programming type of thing, it's literally just writing a document. It did really well with it. And then what I ended up doing is I made a few fake quotes to put into it. And because I wanted to pad it out a little bit to demonstrate the type of writing that we were talking about, because we're actually going into this idea of comparing different voices for things. So pros and cons, highly highly biased versus more neutral bias. So we talked about all these kind of pieces. And so I'm trying to find different examples under the same topic that was like that. And it's really hard because you end up with, yeah, you end up finding stuff that's either too long, too short, too difficult to read, too easy to read, all sorts of stuff. And so having an AI write them for me was just good to provide examples of stuff so that when they did find an actual writing, they could start making the comparison. So that was what this was all about. I also did tell it to focus on a specific grammar point of past and present perfect tenses because that happened to be what they were taking in the grammar class. And so I wanted them to practice it, reading it in this particular case. So if you are good with this, I'd like to go back and I would like to start with the first part, and I'm just going to read them out. And I would like you to do this. You just where you are right now. If you would like to try it out, I would suggest when I create prompts, I always do my prompts in a document of some sort. I don't actually do it directly in the AI at this point. I create it so that I can go back and refine it and I don't accidentally hit the enter key and it sends it off and now I have to start the whole thing over again. I do it in, say, a text document of some sort. So if you wanted to try to do that, or you can write it down with pen and paper, I would like you to think of something you would like to create. So I can even give you a task. Think of something that you could use with your students. So you're going to create some materials. So think of material that you might want to use with your students. Think of don't think of a listening task at this point here because we won't get that far with that. Try and think of something that's a reading and writing task kind of thing. It's a little bit easier to create that right now. So think of something for the students that you would like to do. And the first thing I would like you to do is I would like you to write down the goals and roles that you would like to have for this. So the goal, again, as you're writing this down, is what do you want the output to be? What is it that you want it to create? What is that end result? Is it a reading? Is it a writing task? Is it maybe it's a pre-listening task. Maybe you do have a listening thing you're thinking of and you want to do some pre-listening on or some discussion on that. Maybe you want to create a warmer that you can do at the beginning of class on something and you need some ideas about what to do. Whatever it is, I would suggest probably some nice and easy, something like a reading with some reading tasks. So maybe you want to create a reading and you want to create a pre, during, and post reading task or something, or you want to have it a certain type of task that goes together with that. So think of that goal and then give the role to the AI. So like I said, it could be that it's a textbook publisher for this kind of thing, or maybe you're writing something very, very specific. You want something like it's a newspaper writer, like because you want to have it as a newspaper kind of thing. Or if I'm thinking task-based learning, kind of CLB type of stuff, maybe it's something like there's a notice from the bank about their account or something like that, an email that they're going to get. So you just say, write this as you are, Royal Bank of Canada, writing to talk about the fact that they are eligible for a line of credit or something, because these are the kind of things that you would often get a lot of spam email from your bank to ask you to try and sign up for new things. So you could have that. Think of the role, think of the goal. Come up with those pieces. And then as you've done that, as you think of, okay, this is the goal, I want you to create this. I want you to take on this role. Then I think start putting the constraints in there, right? Give it the context, give it very specific and clear instructions. So tell it things like, I need you to write a negative letter or a positive thing or whatever, that kind of thing, the CLB level or the CEFR level, the number of words, maybe restrict the number of words, something like 200 words, 400 words of that kind of thing. Whatever it is, the style of writing you want it to be, put all of those very specific and detailed instructions. Okay. So just think about that, what you could put in there. You can do all of this while I'm talking, I guess, if you wanted to do this along with me. Make sure that you provide some examples. So if you're trying to say it's supposed to be fairly formal, maybe write a formal sentence so that it can know kind of the language that you're looking for. Okay. Or if you're wanting it to be something that uses specific type of jargon, you can write that some of that jargon into there as well too. So provide examples. Often to me, it's just one sentence that's in the style of what I want it to be. And then restrict it a little bit. Tell it not to do certain things. So tell it that I don't want you to, I'm trying to think with this email, for example, from the bank. I don't want you to provide any links to any external stuff. I don't want you to use any threatening language or anything like that. Like you're trying to restrict what it's trying to say. There's the audience. So again, who is this going to be written for? Making sure it's clear that it's for this type of student. And then you can give it a try. So if you want at that point, you can then copy that in and you can paste it into, if you're wanting to try one that's really easy without having to sign up, you can actually just go to chatgpt.com. It's easy. Or you can go to copilot.microsoft.com. And if you're not logged in, you will still be able to use those two tools without an account. Both Copilot and ChatGPT have free versions that don't require an account. They're just much more limited. So you could then go in, paste it into the box on one of those and hit enter and see what you end up with. Denise has posted a link to her slides from before that have a few sample prompts if you want to help you get started. And so you can try it from there. So I want to make sure people have a chance to do that, but I also want to leave it open for questions and comments at this point here while people are trying it out, because I would like to hear from people about what the experience is like with narrowing those prompts down, how well it works for them. So I'm going to give you some space to do that, but I also want to make sure that we're using our time properly here. So if you do have questions or comments at this point, again, you can throw them in the chat. You can raise your hand. You can just turn on your mic. I'll try and catch you. So feel free to do that. Yeah, good point, Megan. There is that, especially from Hugging Face. That's a really good space to go, good link for environmental primers and that kind of stuff. We did talk about it in our last session with Denise. We did have a chance to be able to talk a little bit about that as well too. But here's the crux of it. I, as an educator, I need to know what my students are capable of doing in AI, and I can't do that unless I'm using AI. I am careful about making sure that stuff that's very intensive, for example, I do not do any of the video generation. I limit the times I use any image generation because those are high ones. And one of the things I am starting to do is I didn't talk about it in this here yet, but I actually do use an AI on my computer that is local. It runs off only my computer. And so it actually, you can do this. It's far too technical for a situation like this. But as I've been going through and learning more about it, I've decided that a lot of the stuff I'm starting to practice now, I can actually do as a local type of AI. So you can actually now have, when we talk about local, it's hosted on your computer. It does not go out to the network to try and pull out anything. It can all be generated within using your own computer's processor as opposed to server farms out there. And so I actually encourage people that these low-level type of things can actually be done using what's called local type of things. The problem with that is it's still pretty technical for the average person to kind of do on their own. I think in time that will get a lot easier for people to do, and they'll be able to just install a program on their computer and be done and be able to do it. But at this point here, it's hard for me in these beginning sessions to be able to encourage people to do that because it's so hard to kind of explain how to do it. It requires databases and then connecting those databases to the particular module itself. So there are out there are situations to be able to do that. And in fact, Lucas Wright, who the guy I was talking about from University of British Columbia, he also even has started to do image generation locally on his computer. So then that way, again, it's not sending it out to the server farms to do that, which dramatically lowers the impact because it's just another program on your computer in that case. So give it time. We're in the early stages of AI where everything has to be sent out. Well, not really, but most things have to be sent out to a server farm. But as we move towards AI generation and becoming much more, we're going to get a lot more specific in types of things. We're going to be able to create AI modules, which we can then offload and be able to use on our own computer. That's the key. I think that's the pivot point where AI will be a lot more environmentally friendly because everything will be far more focused and local. When I talk about local, I mean on your own computer. So I appreciate you bringing it up, Megan. I really do. I think that is very important that we discuss that. I think there is something to understand the difference between high intensity and low intensity type of prompts. The prompt we have to have it generate a writing task is fairly low intensive versus image generation, audio generation, and video generation. So just keeping that in mind as well too. So there you go. That's where we're at with that so far. Anybody to have a chance to be able to try that while we were doing this discussion? Anybody tried out a prompt right there to see what they got from ChatGPT for their writing task? Did anybody create anything? If you didn't, that's okay. We don't have to. All good? Okay. Doesn't look like anybody at this point here. Yeah, you can post your prompt, Sarah, if you have one. Feel free if you want to post your prompt. And if you want, I can even demonstrate with it. If you want, I can share my screen and do it. So if anybody has a prompt they like, they can post in the chat. I'm happy to also take that and be able to show how this kind of thing would work.
Okay, so oh, sorry. I'm just going to put it in now. So,
Okay, I see another one here, which I'm going to do right.
yeah.
So I'm going to copy that one in and I'm going to share my screen while we do that so we can see what I've got. I'm going to switch to Copilot. So this one was a goal to create an email from a landlord that will be used for a CLB reading task, CLB 7, sorry, reading task. Role, you are a landlord and respond to a complaint from the tenant. You are dismissive and avoidant and do not directly address the problem. Audiences CLB 7, do not use any profanities or rude language. Yeah, like that. I actually had one where I had to limit it because it was saying some threatening things. I had to tell her not to do it. So then it gives you this particular email. And so you can see it here. Now with Copilot, I can just hit copy and I can copy that into a text document and be able to do that. You can see how it even did this thing where it's a reply. You can see it's a reply, recent complaint, but it didn't put in the tenant's name. It didn't put in the landlord name. So I might go back in a prompt like this because I want to make it as realistic as possible to give it, again, very specific details, the tenant's name and the landlord's name so that we can do it. That's what I have here. I'm going to actually, this is totally slightly different from this, but it's actually one of those things I like to mention just because when I was teaching Link, this came up. I had a student one time who had a letter from, they brought in the letter from their son's teacher, and they were really upset. They said that the teacher had told them not to contact them or not to ask them any questions. And I thought that was very odd. So they brought in this letter and I took a look at it and I read it and it was like, it was a nice letter. It was really well done. And I said, no, actually, they're welcoming you to be able to ask questions and stuff. And then they pointed out the phrase, don't hesitate to contact us if you have any, contact me if you have any questions. They didn't understand hesitate. And so they just dropped the word hesitate and went, don't contact us if you have any questions. That literal part where they didn't understand a word and so then skipped it changed the meaning completely. And it's in those situations, I actually sometimes when I do that kind of thing, try to put those really difficult phrases that might get misinterpreted. And I will tell the AI or myself, oh, actually, now I can do it myself. I could just copy this and then edit it because I don't have to have AI to rewrite this at this point. I'll just put in that information. But for the next time, maybe in this goal or in the context part, I might ask it to specifically include certain phrases. So then that way I know those tricky phrases come up and I can address them in the practice exercise. So those kind of things come up. So that was well done, whoever had that one. Who was that? Jay Hudson, thank you. Oh, Nancy, having logging in issues with ChatGPT. You don't have to do the login with that. I'll actually show you really quickly if you want. Let me just share my screen real quick here. If you go to chatgpt.com, and if you're not logged in, you can see it says login up here. I can still use it without asking. And I can do the same thing with copilot.microsoft.com. If I'm not logged in, I can still use it without it. I can just hit get started and then it will ask you your name just because it likes to talk with you, but you can just put in whatever you want. And you can just hit next. Don't worry about that. From here, this is where you can actually do your chat with Copilot. And so you don't need to have an account. I give it a fake name every time I use it because I just don't want it talking to me like as if I'm its friend. So just have one of those things. I find it very weird when AI has this very personal conversation with you and you're like, yeah, I know you're a machine. Stop that. All right, I got one here from Sarah. We're going to take a look at this as well too. So I'm going to just do the same thing. I won't even change my chat. I'm just going to paste in this one here. And here is the reading exercise that you would then get from it. This is the kind of stuff I find I like having it AI do this kind of stuff because this is really hard finding good reading material like this. The kind of stuff like this I do also do, but this is the stuff that I offload to my local AI because it doesn't require going out to the internet and pulling information. It's smart enough to be able to do that without it. But this kind of stuff actually does require it to pull information from other places. And so that's, yeah, it's pretty good reading. I might take the time then and ask it for, so I can say, create a free reading exercise for my CLB 7 students. And it will kind of come up with some stuff that might come off of that as well too. So I will stop that, see where we're at with that. So good job on both of these. I think you're going to find that the more detailed you get, the more you add information to it, the better the results that you end up getting out of it. So I think that that's one of those key pieces that you eventually get to the point where you'll find that it's really helpful to just kind of keep that iteration, keep moving forward, keep trying things. So, Denise, did you have anything you would like to talk about with the stuff that you had done? And
I
then,
think you have one more question from Jay Hudson about local AI, if you want to. He says, can you
oh,
explain more about local AI and examples?
yeah. It's actually on my home computer, so this is my work computer. So I don't have it on this one here because, you know, ITs at schools and stuff, they don't like you installing stuff on their computers and stuff. Not to mention this one here, they gave me an old computer and it doesn't have the storage space for me to be able to do that. But here's what happens. I'll give you the nuts and bolts of it. So there are these places where they have two parts to it. One is the program itself, which allows, it's the interface for the database. So it's the space where you ask the prompts and do all that kind of stuff. So there's this frame, and what it is there's all these open source type of databases that are available to be used. And you can actually download versions of those to your computer. They're quite large, I'm going to say right now. These databases are in the gigabytes, quite large, like 50 gigabytes, that kind of thing. So they take up a good chunk of space on your computer. But then what you need to do is you need to take that interface and connect it to the database. You need to tell it, where is this database stored? It's on my computer. You might do it I have mine on an external drive just because I didn't want to take up space on my computer. So I have all the database on the external drive. So I had to connect it and tell it, this is where you find it. And then what it does is it works just the same as any other chat one. I can type in questions and it will pull only from that database. And I can still ask it to connect to certain stuff externally. So if I find a link for something or a document I want to upload, it will do that. And what's really nice about it is it doesn't add it to a training database. It just adds it to the database that's on that hard drive. So it never gets out to the world for that kind of stuff. It only keeps everything locally. That link that Megan posted about Hugging Face, that's where a lot of these open source kind of databases are hosted. And so it's pulling from that. That's why I said I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with it because it gets pretty technical. But that's essentially what it is. It's an interface and a database. They connect together and you can be off the internet completely if you want to use it. But if you are connected to the internet, you can start connecting external stuff to it so that it can then search for stuff within it. So if you say, search this web page and give me some information about it, it will do that as well. So that's basically how it works. Yeah, I don't want to get too technical with it, but it's one of those things where I'm a bit of a geek, so I'll do that kind of stuff. I like it. I like to try it and see what happens. Because I also was thinking the same thing. Is there a lot of stuff I can do that does not require me having to connect to these big server farms, which then take up huge amounts of energy, which then, of course, there's water cooling on a lot of those things. There's energy efficiency that happens off it. So yeah, that's one of the things we're trying to avoid as much as possible. Anything else, Denise, that you wanted to add?
I think I think it's really great. Everyone's kind of like trying things on their own and I like the fact that we're all at different levels. I feel like the group here, like, you know, we have people just starting out and then people that have been using it on a daily basis. And I think that's kind of the part where the community of practice that you were talking about, Nathan, that's super important because I think there's always an entry point, and I think it's just to get started and try it. I really liked what Sarah was saying about how, you know, like I want to use it, but I want to make sure that what I'm doing is pedagogically sound. And I think I was in
Yes.
the same boat as you, Sarah. So I see everyone kind of like really trying all these amazing things, but and also kind of finding the sweet spot for yourself, I think is really important. Um, uh, there's a lot of different ways of using AI, and I think finding what you're comfortable with is super important. And to know that you don't have to do everything, and you don't have to, you know, be amazing at every single aspect of AI, but just to use it in a way that actually solves your problem. Like, so if you have a certain struggle that you're like, you know what, this is taking way too much time, focus on that as opposed to like, oh, I need to make it, you know, super fun for my class or whatever it is. Like, don't be, because there's just so many tangents you can go off of with AI. And I think that's kind of like for myself, my takeaway from it as well. Focus on what helps you. And I'm sure, you know, your colleagues, especially the ones that you're working together with, because you guys are working in the same context with the same group of students, that is something that is super valuable to kind of tap into as well. So, you know, as you're saying, you know, other people are doing certain things, or like start with that. And then I think you'll find a really good group to kind of bounce ideas off of, like Nathan was saying. So yeah, just keep at it. And then there's never, it's kind of like having a baby. It's never a good time. You just do it. And then it just, you know, and then it's like, okay, let's figure it out. Right. So I think it's kind of like that. I always, like, even when I first started using AI with my students, I didn't feel super confident doing it just because I felt like, well, I'm not the expert like in creating, you know, materials, whatever it is. But my students were just so willing to try. It was the perfect moment for my class. It wasn't the perfect moment for me, but it was the perfect moment for my class. So I think that it's definitely something to consider when you're using AI, is just that you never know, because everything's constantly changing. You can never catch up because it's constantly changing. So just go for it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, and it's okay.
Yeah, agreed. One of the thoughts I had about this when we're talking about this community of practice stuff was, I'm going to switch hats a little bit, but I used to work for Tutela a long time ago. And of course, Tutela provides a space for being able to have, there's groups inside there where you can create certain groups, and you can also share resources. So you have those two pieces happen. So you have the groups, they can have their own webinars and that kind of stuff. They can have the Tutela-wide type of webinars, but then you can also share resources and share them within that area. And my thought is that it would be great if there was a space within that to have this kind of ongoing conversation where maybe there's a group that has community of students or teachers that come together to talk about how they're using AI or not using AI because of the concerns about certain things, privacy, copyright, environment, all of those pieces. And so they can have those conversations, but it would also be a place to be able to share kind of best practices, how it's being used, that kind of thing. So it's not just a one and done type of thing, but it's a space for them to be able to asynchronously be able to share resources, and then maybe every once in a while have a synchronous webinar or that kind of thing. So that was kind of thinking about that kind of stuff. Here in BC, there is within BC Teal, they're developing these community of practices, and one of them was generative AI in that particular case is coming up, and educational technology. And so in that particular group, that's where a space where people can meet and talk about this kind of stuff, whether in person or online, asynchronous, synchronous, doesn't matter, share resources, and then that way they can kind of build off of that. I did want to share one space as well that I wanted to talk about as well, and see if anybody is keen on that. Where is that at here? I think it's this one. So I don't know if we pasted this in or not into the chat. We can do it again. But there's this Padlet that we put together. And if you want, you can continue to use this as a space to be able to do that. You can also do it inside the website that we created as well too, for you to be able to do that. You can share comments and stuff in there as well. But I did want to also point out, that's where my slides are. There's not really much for slides really to know. But the prompt library that's in here comes from Ethan Mollick. So that was the guy who created that really, really long one at the beginning. And he has a number of different things. And this is a good place to kind of start from, because he uses Creative Commons licensing for this. So you're welcome to these pieces. So you can go in and you can actually find some stuff that's in here that you can then adapt. So I really like the tutoring ones that are up here. And so if you went in, he calls it Bing, but it's been changed to Copilot. He just hasn't changed the name yet. But you can actually take this information and create the tutor. And that's, you'll notice with the tutor one that came from that I posted there as well. But you can also create simulations and case studies and stuff. If you're teaching higher level students, I was doing Workplace Link, and I created a case study for my students to work through. And so when I did that, I had to manually do that, and it took a lot of work to kind of grade that. But this would be a place to be able to do that. But then there's also instructor aids as well too. So talking about simulation creators, quiz creators, that kind of stuff. Now he's from the University of Pennsylvania, so it's all higher ed. So keep that in mind. But it doesn't mean that you can't get ideas from it. And I think that's the key. For me, I always look at it and I look them through that lens of what I'm talking about. What is he telling the AI to do? And what is he telling it not to do? And then that helps me be able to become a bit more specific in the prompts that I do. So yeah, I don't know what else to share at this point. We can still leave it open for some questions at this
I
point
do
here.
have one
Yeah.
one shameless plug, because I'm on the
Yes.
BC Teal board.
Oh, sure.
And if you want a little bit more help with prompt engineering, we are hosting another session about prompt engineering. So I'll share the link there if you're interested. It's free for our members, and I think $30 for non-members. But I'll share it here. If you're interested, in January, we're hosting this as well, and it'll be a great, a great place to chat and discuss as well.
Yeah. And feel free to reach out to Denise and I as well too. We're also open to helping with that kind of stuff. By all means, this is the way I learned too. Like this is the one thing I always get nervous about doing these sessions because you always think like, oh, you're the expert, but I'm not. I'm a learner. I'm a learner just like all of you. I'm just maybe further ahead than some of you, but that's it. And so I'm just trying to tell you my journey and where I ended up and where I'm going. And so I think in all this case, Denise and I both can learn from this from other people. So by you asking, yeah, I am a bit nerdier. You can ask me questions and then I can learn from that. And so that's actually how it, through the pandemic, when I talked about helping people moving their classes online, a lot of what I ended up learning was from somebody asked me a question, and then I had to go off and research it and then come back and give them an answer. And so ask questions because if I don't know the answer, I'll try and find it for you. That's basically what it boils down to. The prompt library for Sarah, I'll actually put the link, direct link in here as well. But it's in the Padlet, which I'll also share. But here's the direct link to the prompt thing if you want that. But here is the direct link to our Padlet, where you are also welcome to share ideas, post stuff if you want. That's totally fine with us. Ask questions. I think that's it from me. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Well, thank you so much. If there's no other questions coming in, thank you, Denise and Nathan, for this presentation and the last, and sharing your expertise and knowledge with us. And I'd also like to thank David and Mike, our Sarah partner interpreters, for your wonderful service. And if you are able to, oh, Denise?
No, I think it's an auto-generated hand.
Oh,
This
I
is where
see.
AI gets it wrong. So
Round of applause. Um, so I think in the chat here, my colleague is going to post the evaluation survey. If you could please take a few minutes to fill it out. And I hope to see you all at the next webinar in this series. It will be January 15th at 3:00 p.m. Atlantic time. And that registration form is also in the chat, and you can also find it on our website. All right, so thank you again, and
thank you.
have a great day, everyone.
Thank you,
Yes,
Nathan.
everybody have a good holidays for sure.
You too. Happy holidays, everyone.